Chapter 8. Opening his eyes for what felt like the first time in his life, Fred was met with what felt like vibrations in the air, causing him to flinch in recoil in short bursts of pain. Fortunately for him, his breathing was in between the spurts of vibrations, allowing him to breathe somewhat normal. Putting two and two together, he eventually reached the conclusion that the vibrations were just normal, if he could call it such. Adjusting himself, he regained his posture and eyesight. Upon looking around the room, he saw wood everywhere. This wood moved like he had never seen before. It was alive, actually alive. Fred's mind, struck by curiosity, did not notice the door behind him open gently and silently, revealing a set of twins, or what seemed to be twins. They were both shorter than Fred by at least 1 foot, having different styles of hair and clothing deviating from the norm of twins wearing the same thing. The first twin to the left had 2 pigtails hanging from the side of her head, and a rather large grin that brought her cheeks to almost like tennis balls near the edges of her eyes. It was to Fred quite a scary grin, to say the least. With eyes almost as big as her grin, they searched Fred like they were evaluating him. They were the lightest shade of purple and were very gentle with their gaze. A button nose and small ears finished off the girl's face, as a cherry would on a cupcake. Now the most bizarre thing about these twins was their clothing, with rabbit embroidery literally all over it. It was more like a gown with a collar and some buttons on the torso. It spoke out as clothing for someone quite young in age or mental capacity. The young twin on the right had an upwards pointing bun that made her appear taller than she was. Her face, unlike her twin, was neutral, and the straight line on her face was almost as long as the grin on her sister's face, making it appear she had a rather flat face. Unlike her sister's eyes, her eyelids were half closed, revealing the dark shade of glossy pink as the colour of her eyes. Seemingly also evaluating him with a scan, they revealed to be as neutral as her sister's, despite the half-closed appearance. Once again, her clothing smothered in rabbit embroidery. She wore long flared trousers with a long flared top. Both of their shoes, Fred finally noticed, were exactly the same size and design, brown leather stitched with a rope-like thread. "Hello there, Frederick." "Or is it Fred?" the twins said in turn, with smiley first and straight smile second. Fred was unsure if he was dreaming, as the beings before him seemed too dreamlike to be realistic. "What a strange dream," Fred said, looking around him. "You hear that, sis? He thinks he's dreaming," said Smiley. "Would a dream do this?" said Straightface, as she prodded him with a finger. "Ow!" said Fred, rubbing his arm to see an immediate bruise. "You're bloody strong for a little girl," said Fred immediately, giving Straightface a screwed-up face. "We are not little girls," said Smiley, with 2 hands on her hips. "We are older than you, Freddy," said Straightface, looking at her sister, then copying her hip gesture. "Fred, not Freddy, kiddo," said Fred, copying the gesture. There was a moment of silence before the girls started giggling, and in turn Fred joined them. "Is this really not a dream?" asked Fred. It is not a dream, said the sisters in unison. Okay, so what do I call you young ladies? Smiley answered first. Fregarne, Straight-Face followed. Mesana. Nice to meet you two young ladies. Now, where on earth are we? Asked Fred, taking his neck for a circular 360 of the room. You're in the great palace of our father, the king, they replied in unison. King? Fred questioned with a face of confusion. Of what country? Fred followed up. Well, you humans call us Rabations. We are the moon people, Mesana replied. Rabations? I've never heard of that term before. What does it mean? Fred asked with a raised eyebrow. Rabbit people, Fregarne responded. Rabbit people? You have a connection to rabbits? Fred asked, and immediately looked at the embroidery on their clothing. Silly question, Fred thought. We are the legacy of rabbits and humans, Mesana said with a serious tone. Enough questions, Freddy. We need you to see our father, Fregarne said, with a soft hand on Mesana's shoulder. With a turn to face her sister, she nodded in agreement, and then they took aside each beside Fred, and took his arms into theirs. Fred immediately felt their immense strength and let resistance go. Almost carrying him out of the shimmering wooden room, they led him to even more shimmering wood, down a long hallway, which led to a large number of rooms. The one in question to which he needed to go to was a large polished oak door that did not shimmer. Fred looked twice at it, as if examining it in more detail. Confirming it was indeed still and not moving, he sighed with relief, and the two young sisters pushed on the door in sync, creating a door opened as if by a strong wind. The room was large, and was not accompanied by shimmering wood. In fact, it looked like a room his father might have created, with a large patterned carpet covering most of, but not all of the room. Its patterns reminded him of an old lady knitting for some reason. Wooden furnishings everywhere. Everything seemed so perfectly crafted and polished. Bookshelves were a large part of the room, with hundreds, if not thousands of books expanding across the room. Rabbit embroidery was still visible even in this room, as it loomed on large fabric decorations hanging from the ceiling. A fireplace lit the room with a soft yellow and orange glow, with the echoes of the flame's shadows haunting the excess areas of the room. A single man's presence could be felt near the fireplace, on the large wooden and felt chair, possessing the small area encircling the flames. Frederick, great timing, the room has just warmed up, said an experienced, yet tired voice. We brought him, Daddy, the twins said in unison. Told you we could do it, Fregarne commented. Of course we could, Mesana added. Hello, Your Majesty? Asked Fred, not really knowing how to address the old man. The voice emerged with a body from behind the large chair. Standing just a fraction taller than Fred, there was a man of at least age 80. His hair a strong grey, it flowed down the side of his broad shoulders and down the back of his neck. His eyes were narrowed and stoic, almost aware of everything that he looked at. Their colour a strong blue, it reminded Fred of a powerful ocean in a storm. His brow was concentrated, even in an appearing relaxing state. His nose was the midpoint of large and small. His beard was large, and a lighter shade of grey in comparison to his hair. His moustache covered his upper lip and teeth, only revealing his lower lip. His body held a stance of confidence Fred could compare to a fighter of some kind. He was built, clarifying he held strength, despite his age. Finally, Fred noticed a small paw clawing up the king's shoulder, and what emerged was a rabbit. "My name is Francis Touchet. You may call me Francis. I am the king and ruler of this kingdom, and you, Frederick Summers, have been chosen." "Sorry, Francis, but how does everyone know my name? Chosen for what?" Fred felt like he was on some sort of game show, or being pranked somehow. It just didn't feel real. "You were chosen. Your name was given to us from the watching moon to take part in the trials, to take my place and marry my daughter." The king's words were strong enough to hit Fred in the stomach, and the seriousness in his eyes called that this was no joke or TV show. It was real. Everything was real. "What?" Fred said in astonishment. "You have been—" "No, I understand what you said. It just doesn't make sense. How have I been chosen? I don't have any desire to be a king, or at least I've never thought about it." The king's expression softened, and he replied, "Have you ever looked at the moon and felt a connection? It could be the slightest feeling, where for a moment you lose yourself in its presence, and your eyes and soul just become fascinated, or bluntly put, obsessed with it. How could you—" The king slowly raised his hands to point to himself. "I have stood where you stand right now, wishing not to be a king, wishing not to marry a woman I know nothing about. It all sounds like madness, but I will tell you that my life here has been the most fulfilling experience. The concept of this world and people in it are entirely different from Earth." Fred stood in silence, with eyes directed at the old king, and for what felt like an eternal moment, he stayed in thought. Something had taken hold of his stomach, a feeling hard to digest, one that stagnated and thumped with reminders of its existence. His heartbeat felt unnatural, almost corrupted by the unimaginable situation presented to him. The beats of his heart revealing a confusion mixed with the innocence of helplessness. He was unsure how to move forward. Noticing this, the king slowly blinked and kept his eyelids closed for a couple seconds before reopening his eyes with hands softly closed together. He said, "This is a lot to process for even the best of men. For you, tonight will be a major adjustment to this environment, so I will ask my daughters to take you to your room, where you can have some time alone. Forgive me, Frederick, for having you here, but you could be the key part in the future of this kingdom. If you wish to return home, you can just fail the trials, but even I do not know the measure of failure. Self-sabotage may only take you so far. I wish, however, for you to take a new perspective on this situation, regardless of its complexity and dreamlike influence, and see it as a different path for your life, or potential one." Fred stayed silent once more, but gave a nod to the king. The young twins took him by the arms with powerful grips once more, and began turning him to leave the room. Fred looked into the king's eyes one last time before turning, and saw something of himself reflected upon him. Leaving the room, the twins happily escorted him down the long corridor towards the stairs where they would take him up 2 flights. Upon reaching the 5th floor, a woman Fred could not place an age on was walking past and going down the stairs. Fred had never seen such a woman before. His eyes encompassed by her, the twins giggled like schoolgirls and gave each other a look that demonstrated they knew something Fred did not know. "Don't worry, Freddy, that isn't our sister. That's just a maid. Our sister is the most beautiful lady in the world. Except Mum, of course," said Mesana. "Of course," added Fregarne. "That's just a maid, they say. My heavens," thought Fred. Fred's thoughts became deep as they reached his room. The sisters opened the door, and the room felt so familiar to him, like he had been there before. The smell of the wood surrounding him felt fresh. The carved furniture so detailed and crafted with care, he felt devotion and a love in this room that made him feel happy. The bed looked soft, the pillows were fluffed, and the one window at the back wall brought in the multicoloured sky with a glaze on the wood. That only made his eyes gobble with admiration. "Here's your room, enjoy your stay," said the sisters. "But what about the—" Before he could finish asking about a toilet or even a shower, the sisters had shut the door and disappeared. Tossing that thought aside, he sat on the wooden chair and placed himself at the table accompanying it. Everything that was happening, and that had happened, feels and felt like a dream. How could something like this happen? How could something like this even exist? What would happen if the world he knew about this? Loads of questions, possibilities, conclusions, and more found a pathway in his mind. Crossing his hands in front of him, his gaze fixed on them, making it appear he was in prayer. His thoughts were all over the place. He was unsure what decision, if any, was the right one to make. He still felt like at any moment he could wake up. Pinching himself again, he soon found that he was not dreaming, but looking at his hands and the reflective wood underneath. He felt a misplaced but lost feeling that was leading him to thoughts of what could be, what would be, or who he could be. A king? Me? A king? It just doesn't seem possible. That's even if I pass these trials that I have no idea about. And then there's a princess who I don't even know that I will marry. This is a bit too much even for me. This just seems too good to be true. I wonder what this princess is really like. Does she want this situation? Is she even a good person? They seem to write this situation off as normal. How is any of this normal? Really? How? Trials? Must mean there are other men. Competition. Do I want them to have this? Whatever this is. No, I don't, but I am the right person to rule a kingdom. No, I don't. But am I the right person to rule a kingdom of people that I know nothing about? Their traditions, hopes, dreams? Am I the right man to accomplish that? Maybe the trials will show me this? I don't know. I wish I had a clue, something to go on. Wait, I'm doing this? Yes. Just do it. What do you have to lose? Nothing. I've got nothing to lose.